For my last video, I really enjoyed the casual approach I took to discussing the games I've been playing over the later few months of 2021. And towards the end of that video, I mentioned doing another video in that format to cover what games I'd hope to play in the future, such as Returnal, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Kena Bridge of Spirits. I can't do that now, because Kena Bridge of Spirits was the best game I played in 2021. Just the other day, I was talking to a friend of mine about games, and we were reminiscing about how as teenagers, play sessions could easily extend into hours upon hours before we felt we needed to take a break. Nowadays, as adults, it's increasingly harder to find time to play, whether that's due to other priorities in day-to-day life, or even just our ability to sit and play for as long before feeling like we have to put the controller down. I started playing Kena at like 8 PM on 29th of December, and I saw the credits roll by 6 PM on the 31st. I've not finished a game in less than 2 days since I played the first Uncharted game last year. Granted, it was the holiday period, I did not have to worry about playing around an 8-hour working day, but let me tell you, I could not and did not want to put down my controller. Just in case, if you were at all like me when I first saw footage of Kena, no, this isn't made by Disney or Pixar. But you're on the right sort of lines. Ember Lab initially started as an animation and digital content studio, focusing on commercials and animated shorts. In 2016, establishing a partnership with Sony Entertainment, the studio decided to shift development into game design. So, how did their first game turn out? You know, before they gained experience in the industry and then took the knowledge to make Kena. Well, this is it. Kena is their first game. Okay, I'm sugarcoating it a little bit. In some aspects when playing, you can tell the developer isn't some grizzled industry veteran who has slowly but surely honed their craft over years and years of work. Hitting an enemy with a staff felt like it was missing that last 10% of punch it probably needed, or sometimes the sound mix for dialogue seemed ever so slightly buried in the soundtrack. But I cannot understate how much this game can get right, which some established developers can even now still get wrong. Obvious first point, the game is visually stunning.
It's beautiful.
Ember Lab's history in animation has paid off big time, as the cutscenes could rival pretty much any of the major animation studios in their levels of polish, to the point that I would not be surprised if one day Sony greenlit a full-length animated feature with Ember Lab behind it. The art direction is easily one of the major selling points of the game, and it translates so beautifully into the gameplay, striking a superb balance of simplistic modelling and textures with details where it counts, and when paired with the game's excellent use of colour, just like any Pixar film through the early 2000s, I think Kena's visuals will stand the test of time. A game can't survive on its visuals alone, however. So what is the story actually about? Kena is a spirit guide, someone who helps troubled souls pass peacefully into the afterlife. When these souls linger on the boundary for too long, they become violent and a threat to others. After being drawn to a source of great suffering, you begin Kena's journey to heal 3 spirits and the world that they inhabit.
I'm searching for the sacred mountain shrine. Can you take me there?
Inspired by Japanese and Southeast Asian cultures, Kena's environments are beautifully crafted. The village you arrive in, that acts as somewhat of a hub space, opening up as your powers grow and the story progresses, is decorated with huts, market stalls, agricultural structures like water wheels, and bridges over running streams and waterfalls. The surrounding forests are truly some of my favourite environments I've explored in a long time, and they aren't even that open. By all accounts, this is a linear game, but there are enough interconnected pathways that can branch off to small nooks and crannies that the space just feels so much more dense than it actually is. The game's soundtrack, composed by Jason Galati, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, does a great job complementing the natural scenery with a heavy focus on gamelan-inspired percussion and woodwind instruments. In a similar vein to Marvel's Spider-Man, I really loved how the soundtrack was able to dynamically adapt to my actions in-game. For example, exploring the lush greenery of the forest, the music is light, whimsical and optimistic. Yet when I found myself drawn to investigate a corrupted piece of land, the score began to fade and become muffled. A rumbling bass frequency was overpowering any instances of melody, as if it were being suffocated in a perfect representation of what I could see on screen. Returning to this spot a little later, and now equipped with the power to destroy the Dead Zone's heart, I was able to cleanse the area, and with it, life came back into the world, and the soundtrack was released once again to reflect the visuals. And this was all due to perhaps Kana's most powerful weapon. The Rot are one of mankind's greatest creations, Kana's magnum opus. The Rot are tiny wisps of the forest, and when found in the world, they will follow and help Kana traverse and fight whatever she comes up against. These little creatures are so adorable that even my girlfriend would get annoyed that I hadn't shown her all the new hats I had unlocked, because yes, you can give them hats. There are a total of 100 Rot to find, and it's not just a number on a menu to fill. They will genuinely follow Kana wherever she goes, either in step behind her or by materializing in and around objects in the environment. As expected, the Rot were my continual muses anytime I broke out the photo mode, and while I wish the filter selection had a percentage meter for adjustments, I think this is another fantastic interpretation of what is becoming an industry standard at this point. In addition to being adorable, the Rot are very handy in a fight, and let me tell you, some of these fights ain't no joke. Kana has a ton of enemy types. I was actually so impressed that even hours into the game I had new foes to fight, new attack patterns to learn and weaknesses to exploit. You do have your cannon fodder enemies of course, but even then when in crowds, even the small guys can pack a punch if you're not careful. Kana can use a staff with light and heavy strikes, unlock a bow for ranged attacks, bombs for crowd control, and also access special moves such as the Rot Arrow or Rot Hammer. Defensive options include a roll dodge, an energy shield that will need to recharge after taking a number of hits, but if timed right the shield can actually parry enemies to open them up for a counter, though I found this to be a tricky window to nail. Overall, I think the difficulty scales pretty fairly. As Kana gains new powers, tougher mini-bosses will begin to appear alongside the regular mobs, requiring a little more thought behind your attacks than wail on R1 and done. And when we talk about the actual spirit boss fights, bar one, which we'll get to, I felt the challenge was done right so that I never felt in total control during the fights, and it was only through a few fails and retries that I would come out on top victorious. Before I get to my one major issue with the game, I also want to highlight the fun puzzle and platforming sections that make up the world traversal in Kana. You have your Uncharted-esque rock climbing over 300-foot death pits, which is, nothing to write home about these days, but they can provide access to some really nice views and vistas, so cool, tick that one off. What I really enjoyed were the bomb-based puzzles. Using a bomb on a glowing pile of rocks will explode and suspend them in midair for a brief period of time. Sometimes the rocks will need further adjustments via arrows on glowing points, and when aligned right, Kana can then reach the next area. Again, this is nothing revolutionary, timed platform hopping ain't exactly a new thing, but I still had a ton of fun working out some of the trickier solutions, especially when the game mixed in the bow's slingshot ability. Right, I really want to discuss the final boss, so if you don't want the last encounter ruined at all, then please skip ahead to this time frame to avoid spoilers. Now I've just mentioned that I believe the difficulty across the full game was fair. Traversal and fighting smaller enemies is fun and even relaxing for a kind of perfect Sunday afternoon on the sofa. All the mini bosses and spirit bosses were challenging and will result in, a few early deaths as you learn the attack patterns, but persist and eventually they can be beaten taking very little damage. The corrupted rock god fight, however.
Bullshit!
It's the final boss, I get it. This is a test of your skills and using everything you've learned at this point. It should be hard, I agree, but this was too much. To start, the game takes away the rot that you've collected, essentially stripping you back down to the basic moveset and having no ability to heal in the first stage.
You what?
After you've died a few frustrating times learning the creature's attacks, you will beat his first stage and then get thrown into this area, where you must beat 3 waves of enemies, including a Wood Knight, to return back to the main boss, all without dying, I may add. If you die here, it's back to the start. Beat these waves and you are granted a small number of rot to allow for some health regen in stage 2. But like in all fights in the game, you only have about 2 healing plants to use, and that's it. Fight the Rot God again as before. Make sure not to get caught in his throw attack, which can launch you past the arena boundary and into a zone which, and I shit you not, slows your movements and drains health. So you better pray that you don't have low health and make it back into the arena as quickly as you can before you die. Beat the Rot God's second stage and you enter another realm, though this time it's a platforming challenge. This bit is totally fine and actually gives you a small portion of time for you to breathe, so you know I'll give the devs a thumbs up there. Now you re-enter the arena for the third and final stage, but now small enemies will spawn around you. They go down quick, sure, but you better make sure one doesn't get a hit in when you're focusing on the main fight. And whilst dealing with this new addition, the Rot God also introduces an entirely new attack, which, if you're not ready for, could result in a death and, like any point in the whole fight, will take you right back to the beginning. As it turns out, this move is easily stopped with the Rot and will reduce the God's health drastically, but you better hope that in the midst of all these enemies and particle effects, with your heart rate exceeding the speed of light, that you spot this small symbol to indicate that Rot need to be used at this exact moment. Then the fight is finally over. Now bear in mind that my final victory came after a 14-minute run, and this was after multiple attempts over the better part of 2 hours. This did not feel like the same challenging but fair difficulty that I had found in every other boss fight, and I would say that you don't even need to change much to make it so. Just having 1 wave of enemies after the first stage, or keeping a small number of rot at the very beginning to allow for an early heal if you just messed up some dodge timing. Taking away that stupid void which drains your health if you're thrown into it. Look, I understand that allowing checkpoints between each stage removes a lot of the tension and satisfying nature when you finally push through to the end, so yes, don't rely on those. But there had to have been something the devs could have done. I just can't picture a team of people built this whole fight and collectively said, yeah, ship it. And this wasn't even on master difficulty. I played on normal. I wanted to platinum this game, Ember Lab.
You think this is funny?
In a cosmic sort of way, yes.
Well, Mr. Funny Man, is this how you get your sick kicks?
What? It's just an ordinary crabby... Oh my goodness!
Kena is, and I mean this in the best way, like a PS2 game built for the PS5. There isn't an overly complex story full of deep characters to identify with, there isn't an RPG level of character progression, and there isn't some weird tacked-on multiplayer mode full of microtransaction BS. Kena simply presents to you a gorgeous, intriguing world and says, go explore it. On a performance level, Kena ran beautifully, frame rates were solid even during some of the craziest moments, and I don't think I came across a single glitch or bug during my entire playthrough. I fully plan to beat this game on master difficulty and get the platinum trophy, because I do not want to leave a single spot of this world unseen. Kena Bridge of Spirits is my game of the year for 2021. I simply could not recommend it more, and I cannot wait to find out what Ember Lab will create next. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really love this game. I really find it hard to kind of come up with any faults, to be honest. So if you have some spare time and some, something you want to treat yourself to, this is the one to do, I think. Sit back, have a blast, and let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like the video, as always, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. It does help me out quite a lot. And until next time, I will look forward to seeing you again. Bye.